Welcome to this journey through the darkest corridors of modern mystery, where justice remains elusive and truth hides behind locked doors. Tell us where you're watching from now, because this story will haunt you in a way few other accounts can, not through ancient legends or distant history, but through crimes so recent they still bleed into our present moment. We're about to delve into mysteries that have confounded the world's most sophisticated law enforcement agencies, where the 21st century's promise of technology, surveillance, and forensic science has failed to illuminate the shadows where killers still hide. These are not the cold cases of decades past. These are wounds that remain open, families that still wait for answers, and truths that mock our belief in an orderly, knowable world. It was the year 2000. The new millennium had arrived with promises of technological revolution, DNA analysis, digital surveillance, cell phone tracking, the internet connecting every corner of the globe. We stood at the threshold of an age where it seemed impossible for anyone to simply vanish, for murders to go unsolved, for perpetrators to slip through the tightening net of modern justice. The 20th century had been humanity's bloodiest, but surely the 21st would be different. Surely now, with all our tools and knowledge, crime would finally meet its match. We were wrong. What follows is not a single story but a collection, a dark tapestry woven from cases that defy resolution, that challenge our assumptions about safety, justice, and the very nature of evil in modern world. From suburban America to the coasts of Portugal, from the frozen north to tropical islands, these mysteries share a common thread. They happened in our lifetime, in our supposedly transparent age, and yet they remain as impenetrable as any ancient enigma. The victims are real, the families still grieve, the questions still burn, and somewhere, someone knows what happened. The Algarve coast of Portugal curves like a golden smile along the Atlantic, where limestone cliffs meet azure waters and whitewashed villages cling to hillsides bathed in perpetual sunlight. It's a place where northern Europeans flee the gray dampness of their homelands, seeking warmth and the illusion of simplicity. The resort town of Praia da Luz, Beach of Light, lived up to its name that spring, attracting families to its modest apartments and quiet streets. On the evening of May 3, 2007, the air carried the salt, sweet smell of the ocean mixed with the scent of grilled sardines from nearby restaurants. The sun had set at 8:30 p.m., leaving behind that peculiar Mediterranean twilight where the sky holds light long after the sun disappears. In apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort, 3 children slept in a rear bedroom, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann and her younger twin siblings. Their parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were dining at a tapas restaurant just 120 meters away, close enough to check on the children periodically, or so they believed, close enough to maintain the invisible tether of parental protection, close enough that nothing could go wrong. They were wrong. At 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann walked back to the apartment to check on the children. The night was warm. The restaurant's chatter faded behind her as she approached the ground floor apartment, its windows facing the street. She pushed open the door. The silence that greeted her was wrong. Not the peaceful quiet of sleeping children, but the hollow emptiness of absence. The twins slept undisturbed in their cots, but Madeleine's bed was empty, the covers thrown back, the pink blanket she called Cuddle Cat abandoned. Kate McCann's scream tore through the Portuguese night. Madeleine, Madeleine, the sound that would echo through 17 years and counting. The window shutters in the children's bedroom had been forced open from outside. The window stood ajar. Someone had been there. Someone had taken her. What followed was the largest missing child investigation in modern history, a media firestorm that would consume continents, destroy reputations, generate tens of thousands of tips, and produce exactly zero answers. Portuguese police initially focused on the parents themselves, their investigation hampered by jurisdictional confusion, media interference, and the harsh glare of international attention. British investigators took over, then worked alongside Portuguese authorities, then conducted parallel investigations. Private detectives were hired, millions of pounds were spent. Surveillance footage was analyzed frame by frame. Witnesses were interviewed, re-interviewed, their statements picked apart for inconsistencies. The evidence was maddening in its contradictions. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a man carrying a child in pink pajamas near the apartment that night, but their descriptions varied wildly. Some said he was Mediterranean in appearance, others said Northern European. He walked toward the beach. No, he walked inland. He was tall. He was average height. He seemed rushed. He seemed casual. Dogs trained to detect human remains and blood indicated positive signals in the apartment and in the family's rental car. But these findings were disputed, dismissed, explained away by alternatives. Theories about bodily fluids and cross-contamination. A suspect emerged in 2020. Christian Bruckner, a German drifter and convicted sex offender who had been living in the Algarve region in 2007. He had a history of breaking into holiday apartments. He had made disturbing statements about children. Cell phone records placed him near Praia da Luz that night. Portuguese and German prosecutors expressed confidence they had found their man. But confidence is not evidence. Statements are not proof. Proximity is not guilt. As of this writing, no charges have been filed in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. No body has been found. No definitive evidence has emerged. Christian Bruckner sits in a German prison on unrelated charges, denying any involvement while prosecutors claim to have proof he killed the child, proof they cannot yet reveal. 17 years later, Kate and Jerry McCann maintain a website with Madeleine's photograph, the bright-eyed 3-year-old who would now be 20 years old. Age progression images show what she might look like as a teenager, as a young woman. But these are phantoms, digital constructs, wishes made visible through software. The apartment in Praia da Luz stands unchanged, still renting to tourists who may or may not know its history. The beach still glows golden in the setting sun. The Atlantic still whispers against the shore. And somewhere, alive or dead, remembered or forgotten, Madeleine McCann exists in a state of eternal absence, a void that consumed millions of investigative hours and still yields nothing but questions. What happened in those minutes between 9:05 p.m., when Jerry McCann checked on the children and found them sleeping peacefully, and 10:00 p.m., when Kate found the empty bed? How does a child vanish from a locked apartment without waking her siblings? How does someone navigate a foreign town with a stolen child and leave no trace in an age of ubiquitous cameras and digital footprints? The answer is either devastatingly simple or impossibly complex. Either way, it remains hidden. New England in early autumn possesses a particular quality of light, crisp and clear, the summer's humidity finally broken, leaves just beginning their transformation from green to gold. Connecticut's suburban landscapes present an image of order, colonial homes with neat lawns, tree-lined streets where children bike safely, communities where everyone knows their neighbors, and crime happens somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere that isn't here. Farmington exemplified this illusion. An affluent town 20 minutes west of Hartford, it boasted excellent schools, low crime rates, and the kind of peaceful anonymity that defines successful suburbia. People moved here precisely because nothing bad happened in Farmington. Jennifer Farber Dulos knew this when she and her husband Fotis chose to raise their 5 children here. She was 40 years old in 2010, a writer working on a manuscript about resilience, a mother devoted to her children's well-being, a woman navigating the complex territory of a deteriorating marriage. By 2017, the marriage had collapsed. Jennifer filed for divorce in June, citing her husband's controlling behavior and concerning temperament. She sought full custody of their 5 children, then between 8 and 13 years old. The legal battle was bitter, expensive, and ongoing when May 24, 2019 arrived. That morning was ordinary in the way mornings are ordinary when you don't know they'll be your last. Jennifer dropped her children at school in her 2017 Chevrolet Suburban. A sensible mom, mobile, black with gray interior, always kept clean. She returned to her rental home on Wells Lane in New Canaan, another picture, perfect Connecticut town where houses sit far back from the road, protected by old-growth trees and the assumption of safety. Security cameras captured her Suburban pulling into the garage at 8:05 a.m. She was never seen again. When Jennifer failed to pick up her children from school that afternoon, friends immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. Jennifer Dulos was, by all accounts, a devoted mother who structured her entire life around her children's needs. She would never simply not show up, never forget, never leave them waiting. Police entered her home and found evidence of violence. Blood, signs of cleanup attempts. Her Suburban was missing. But Jennifer herself, the woman who had existed just hours before, who had kissed her children goodbye that morning, who had plans and appointments and a future, had simply ceased to exist in any physical sense. What emerged in the investigation was a trail of digital breadcrumbs that painted a chilling picture without providing resolution. Surveillance footage showed Jennifer's Suburban driving through Hartford that afternoon, but Jennifer wasn't driving. A man and woman were seen disposing of garbage bags in various trash receptacles along a 4-mile stretch of Albany Avenue, stopping repeatedly, clearly trying to distribute evidence across multiple locations. Police recovered items from these bags: clothing, sponges, zip ties. All contained Jennifer's blood. The man in the footage was identified as Fotis Dulos, Jennifer's estranged husband. The woman was Michelle Trocanis, his girlfriend. The case seemed solved before it truly began. Fotis Dulos was arrested and charged with murder, despite the absence of a body. Michelle Trocanis was charged as an accessory. A third suspect emerged, Kent Mahoney, Fotis's friend and attorney, who had allegedly helped plan the murder. But then the case took its darkest turn. On January 28, 2020, as Fotis Dulos sat in his Farmington home awaiting a bail hearing that would likely send him to prison to await trial, he wrote a note proclaiming his innocence. Then he sealed his garage, fed a tube from his vehicle's exhaust into the cabin, and started the engine. Police found him unresponsive, slumped in his black pickup truck, carbon monoxide doing its silent work. He died 2 days later without regaining consciousness. Whatever he knew about Jennifer's disappearance died with him. The trials of Michelle Trocanis and Kent Mahoney proceeded. Trocanis was convicted in March 2024 of conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and hindering prosecution. She received 20 years in prison while maintaining she had no knowledge of murder, only helped clean up what she thought was evidence of an affair. Mahoney's trial is pending as of this writing, but convictions are not answers. Jennifer's body has never been found despite extensive searches of Connecticut woodlands, water bodies, and properties connected to Fotis Dulos. His construction company had access to equipment that could move earth, crush debris, dispose of evidence in ways difficult to trace. The Suburban was found abandoned near Waveney Park in New Canaan, wiped clean of most fingerprints, but containing Jennifer's blood. The prevailing theory is simple. Fotis Doulos, enraged by the custody battle and his ex-wife's attempts to protect their children from him, ambushed Jennifer in her own garage, killed her, and disposed of her body somewhere in Connecticut's vast forests or waters. The evidence supports this theory. The timeline supports it. The motive is clear, and yet, no body, no murder weapon, no definitive proof that Jennifer Doulos is actually dead, though blood evidence suggests she could not have survived her injuries. The children, now teenagers being raised by Jennifer's mother, live with the impossible state of having a mother who is gone but not confirmed dead, a father who killed himself rather than face trial, and no grave to visit, no place to direct their grief. The house on Wells Lane has been sold. New owners occupy the space where violence erupted on an ordinary May morning. Do they feel it, that residue of tragedy that clings to places where the unthinkable occurred? Connecticut's suburbs remain picture, perfect in their autumn beauty. Leaves still turn gold and crimson. Children still bike on safe streets. Houses still sit far back from roads, protected by old trees. But everyone knows now what they should have known before. Terrible things happen everywhere, even here. Especially here, where the illusion of safety is strongest. Jennifer Doulos is presumed dead, but presumption is not certainty. Her body's location remains one of Connecticut's most guarded secrets, guarded perhaps by the earth itself, or by someone still living who watched the disposal and said nothing, or by the mind of a man who took that knowledge into death with him. 5 years later, the question haunts, where is Jennifer? Before we proceed to our next truly unsolved case, we must pause to examine one that was solved, because the manner of its solution illuminates why modern unsolved crimes remain so frustratingly opaque, and because the questions it answers raise questions that may never be resolved. For 12 years, from 1974 to 1986, California lived under the shadow of a monster. He had many names: the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker, the Golden State Killer. Behind these designations was a pattern of escalating violence. Over 120 burglaries, at least 50 rapes, and 13 murders across the state. The perpetrator was methodical, intelligent, and utterly remorseless. He would stake out suburban homes for weeks, learning the residents' schedules. He would enter through unlocked windows or doors, remove any firearms, cut phone lines. When his victims were asleep, he would shine a flashlight in their faces and issue commands in a harsh whisper. He bound his victims with elaborate ligature systems. He raped with calculated brutality. Sometimes he would pause to eat food from their refrigerators, to rummage through photo albums, to make phone calls to previous victims years after attacking them. His heavy breathing the only sound on the line. The attacks finally stopped in 1986. Either the perpetrator died, was imprisoned for something else, or simply decided to stop. California breathed easier, though survivors continued to live with trauma, and investigators never closed the case files. Decades passed. DNA evidence collected from crime scenes sat in storage, a genetic profile without a name attached. Traditional detective work had failed. The case was cold. In every sense, the trail decades old, witnesses' memories faded, the perpetrator likely dead. Then came the revolution in genetic genealogy. In April 2018, investigators uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA profile to GED Match, a public genealogy database where people submit their genetic information to find relatives. The profile matched distant cousins of the perpetrator. Using family trees built from these connections, investigators identified Joseph James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer living quietly in suburban Sacramento. They surveilled him, collected his DNA from a car door handle and a tissue discarded at a hobby shop. It matched. On April 24, 2018, police arrested DeAngelo at his home. His neighbors were shocked. He was just an old man who yelled at people for making noise, who lived alone after a divorce, who seemed to all the world like a harmless curmudgeon. DeAngelo pleaded guilty in 2020 to 13 counts of first-degree murder and admitted to dozens of rapes. He received life in prison without parole. During his sentencing hearing, survivors and family members of victims finally faced their tormentor. He sat expressionless, shrunken, an old man in an orange jumpsuit who had once been a nightmare-given human form. Justice, decades delayed, had finally arrived. But here is what haunts about the Golden State Killer case. It was solved not through traditional detective work, but through genetic genealogy, a tool that didn't exist for 99% of human history, that only became viable in the last few years. DeAngelo was caught because distant relatives, people who never knew him, submitted their DNA to ancestry databases for innocent reasons, creating a genetic net that eventually captured him. This raises profound questions about our unsolved cases. How many perpetrators are walking free simply because they haven't been caught in the genetic web yet? How many will never be caught because their distant relatives never submitted DNA, or because they lack the extended family trees that make genealogical searches possible? And what about the crimes committed by DeAngelo that we don't know about? He was a police officer who worked in 3 different California agencies between 1973 and 1979, a position that gave him access to police radio frequencies, crime scene investigation techniques, and the ability to move through neighborhoods without suspicion. During his victim impact statement hearing, survivors spoke of additional attacks they believed he committed, crimes for which no charges were filed due to statutes of limitations or insufficient evidence. Joseph James DeAngelo is now 78 years old, serving life in prison. He has never explained why he did what he did, never expressed remorse beyond the bare minimum required by his plea deal, never provided closure beyond confirming what DNA already proved. The case is solved in the legal sense, the perpetrator identified, convicted, imprisoned, but solved does not mean understood. We know who committed these crimes, but not truly why. We know the pattern of his attacks, but not the full scope. We know he stopped in 1986, but not why. And this is the shadow that falls across all our modern unsolved cases. Even when we catch the perpetrator, even when justice is technically served, the human hunger for complete answers often goes unsatisfied. We want not just names but narratives, not just convictions but comprehension. The Golden State Killer case proves that unsolved crimes can be solved decades later through revolutionary technology. It also proves that solving a case doesn't necessarily solve the mystery of human evil itself. With this in mind, we return to cases that remain open, where perpetrators remain unnamed, where families still wait for even the minimal closure that DeAngelo's victims finally received. The Isdal Valley Ice Valley spreads between mountains south of Bergen, Norway, a landscape of sparse vegetation, rocky outcroppings, and the kind of desolate beauty that draws hikers seeking solitude. On November 29, 1970, a father and his 2 daughters were hiking these trails when they discovered something that would become one of Europe's most enduring mysteries. In a remote gully, partially hidden by rocks, lay the burned remains of a woman. She was positioned with her face down, arms bent upward in the pugilistic posture that fire creates in corpses. Her body had been severely burned, but the fire appeared to have been set deliberately. Bottles that had contained a flammable liquid lay nearby. She wore jewelry, watches, and the remnants of clothing. Nearby was a collection of items, 2 plastic bags, various containers for makeup and skincare products, an umbrella, rubber boots, a hiking trail map. And here is where the case became strange. All identifying labels had been removed from her clothing. The tags cut out, the manufacturer marks erased. Even the labels in her coats and shoes had been meticulously removed. The Norwegian police investigation uncovered a trail of mystery deeper than any burn pattern. The woman had used at least 9 false identities while traveling through Norway, all variations on similar names, all using fake addresses. She had stayed in several hotels, always checking in with one of her false identities, always paying cash, always leaving no real trace of her origins. Hotel staff remembered her as elegant, speaking German, French, and Flemish, accented English. She carried expensive luggage, also with labels removed. She seemed educated, cultured, careful. She made no phone calls. She received no visitors. She existed in a bubble of deliberate anonymity. Isotope analysis of her teeth suggested she had grown up in Central Europe, possibly Germany or France. But beyond this, she was a ghost. Fingerprints yielded no matches. Dental records led nowhere. Her face had been too damaged by fire for useful photographs. The ruling at the time, likely suicide, possibly spiralated activities during the Cold War. Then, in 2016, Norway's national broadcaster NRK reopened the case using modern forensic techniques and investigative journalism. They conducted new interviews, analyzed old evidence with contemporary methods, and generated new theories. Isotope analysis of her hair suggested she had moved frequently between different European regions in the months before her death. Carbon-14 dating of her tissue placed her birth year around 1930-1935. But who was she? Why the false identities? Who would go to such elaborate lengths to erase their own existence, only to die by fire in a remote Norwegian valley? Some theories suggested she was a spy, caught between Cold War powers, eliminated to protect secrets. Others suggested a woman fleeing domestic violence or criminal connections, trying to disappear completely. Still others proposed she was part of a smuggling operation, or involved in espionage, or simply someone who wanted to vanish from her old life so completely that even death wouldn't reveal her identity. The investigation concluded in 2018 without identification. The Istel woman remains unidentified, buried in a Bergen cemetery under a headstone that reads simply, "The Istel woman." Her DNA is on file. Her isotope profile is documented. Her dental work has been analyzed. Facial reconstructions have been created and distributed. But no one has come forward. No family has claimed her. No records match her profile. She is a person who existed, who ate food, brushed her teeth, traveled across Europe, looked at herself in mirrors, had thoughts and dreams and a past, but who has been erased so completely that even death cannot restore her identity. This case exemplifies a particular modern mystery. We have more forensic tools than ever before, yet some people remain ghosts. The 21st century's investigative techniques revealed more about the Istel woman than 1970's police work could have dreamed of discovering. But revelation is not resolution. We know more about her origins, her movements, her final hours. We still don't know her name. Somewhere in Europe, perhaps an elderly person remembers a sister, daughter, or friend who vanished in 1970. Or perhaps everyone who knew her is now dead themselves, and she has become completely untethered from human memory, existing only as isotope ratios and dental charts and a burned skeleton in a Norwegian valley. The Istel remains as it was, remote, cold, indifferent to the human drama that unfolded there. Hikers still walk those trails. The mountains still stand guard over their secrets. And in a Bergen cemetery, the Istel woman rests in eternal anonymity, her true identity perhaps the most securely kept secret of the 20th century, resistant even to the 21st century's most sophisticated attempts to uncover it. We have journeyed through cases separated by geography, circumstance, and specific details, yet united by the cruel commonality of irresolution. From Portugal to Connecticut, from California's suburbs to Norway's mountains, these mysteries share the same fundamental characteristic. They resist solution despite every technological advantage, every investigative man-hour, every anguished appeal for answers. What does this tell us about the 21st century's promise of transparency? About our belief that surveillance and science would finally pierce all veils? Perhaps this: evil is not complicated, but it is often simpler than we imagine. Madeleine McCann didn't vanish through some elaborate conspiracy. Someone simply took her from an unlocked apartment while her parents ate dinner 120 meters away. Jennifer Dulos didn't disappear into some witness protection fantasy. She was almost certainly killed in her garage by a man who then disposed of her body. The Golden State Killer wasn't caught through brilliant detective work, but through the accident of genetic relatives using ancestry websites. The Istel woman erased herself so completely that decades of forensic advancement still cannot restore her name. The common thread is banality, unlocked doors, estranged spouses, distant cousins submitting DNA, a woman cutting labels from clothing. The 21st century has not made crime more sophisticated. It has simply revealed how much crimes of earlier eras evaded justice, not through clever planning, but through simple absence of evidence. Our modern tools give us DNA profiles without names to match them, surveillance footage of vehicles without clear shots of drivers, digital trails that end at dead zones, isotope signatures that narrow origins to entire regions but not specific towns. We can see more than ever before. We understand less than we thought. For the families who live within these mysteries, the philosophical implications matter less than the aching void where answers should be. Kate and Jerry McCann maintain their website, their hope expressed in pixels. Jennifer Dulos's children grow into adulthood without knowing where their mother rests. The Golden State Killer's survivors finally saw their tormentor imprisoned, but closure remained partial, contaminated by decades of waiting. The Istel woman has no family we know of to mourn her properly. This is what unsolved crimes do. They freeze time for those left behind. The world continues. Seasons change, technology advances, new cases emerge. But for those waiting for answers, time stops at the moment of loss. Every holiday, every milestone, every ordinary day is shadowed by absence, and the questions that absence generates. And perhaps most disturbing, these are merely the cases that captured public attention. For every Madeleine McCann, there are dozens of missing people whose disappearances generate brief local coverage before fading into the databases of the unsolved. For every Jennifer Dulos, there are countless individuals who vanish with less media fanfare, whose names don't trend on social media, whose cases don't generate podcast series and documentary films. The democratization of information means we know more about crime than ever before, but it also means we see more clearly the scope of what we don't know. Every solved case reveals 10 unsolved ones. Every closed investigation leaves questions that resist answering. But there is a paradox here too. The very tools that fail to solve some cases ensure that no case is ever truly closed. DNA degrades slowly, digital records persist, genetic databases grow. Witnesses' descendants may possess information witnesses themselves never shared. The passage of time doesn't erase evidence. It merely changes how we can access it. Joseph James DeAngelo walked free for 32 years after his last known crime, secure in the belief that he had escaped justice. He was wrong. The tools that would capture him simply hadn't been invented yet. How many of our current unsolved cases are similarly waiting not for a brilliant detective or a lucky break, but for a technology that doesn't yet exist? Perhaps in 2040, someone will write about how the Madeleine McCann case was finally solved through neural imaging analysis of witness memories, or quantum computing algorithms that process decades of data to find the pattern police missed. Perhaps Jennifer Dulos's body will be found by ground-penetrating radar that can scan Connecticut's woodlands in hours rather than years. Perhaps the Istel woman will be identified through DNA matching with descendants who haven't yet submitted their genetic profiles. Or perhaps not. Perhaps these mysteries will remain forever, resistant to any future advancement, their secrets dying with the perpetrators or remaining locked in places we will never think to search. This uncertainty is the true horror, not the crimes themselves, terrible as they are, but the possibility that truth itself may be inaccessible, that some questions lack answers not because we're failing to find them, but because the answers have been destroyed, dissolved, buried beyond recovery. The story of 21st century unsolved crimes remains a disturbing reminder that knowledge has limits, that justice often arrives late or not at all, that the universe is not obligated to provide closure just because we desperately need it, but questions remain. What if Madeleine McCann is alive somewhere, raised under a false identity, unaware of her true origins? What if Jennifer Dulos's body lies in a location so obvious that investigators have overlooked it repeatedly? What if someone reading this knows something about these cases? A detail, an observation, a fragment of conversation overheard years ago. That could solve everything. To this day, in Portugal and Connecticut and Norway and California, physical places hold memories of trauma. The apartment in Praia da Luz still rents to tourists. The house on Wells Lane has new occupants. The Istel Valley remains remote and cold. Joseph James DeAngelo sits in a California prison, an old man serving life without the possibility of parole. And on silent nights, when families gather and count the people around the table, they feel the absence of those who should be present. That empty chair, that missing voice, that future that was stolen and never recovered. If this journey through the darkest corners of modern crime has resonated with you, if you find yourself pondering the fragility of safety and the persistence of mystery even in our supposedly transparent age, then consider subscribing to this channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told, mysteries buried in recent memory that deserve to be examined with the respect and thoroughness they merit. Leave a like if this account has provoked reflections that go beyond mere entertainment, if it has reminded you that behind every unsolved case are real people whose absence creates ripples that never quite smooth out, and comment sharing your thoughts. Do you believe all mysteries can eventually be solved with sufficient time and technology? Or are some truths genuinely unknowable? What responsibility do we bear as a society toward the unsolved cases that don't generate headlines? Until next time, remember that the line between the solved and unsolved, between justice and its absence, is thinner than we like to believe. And somewhere tonight, someone knows the answer to one of these mysteries. Perhaps they always will. Perhaps they'll never tell. This is the untold hour, where history's shadows persist into our present moment, and the questions we ask echo longer than any answer we might receive.